Welcome to this podcast chat on Breakout Rooms. So we've got Keith, one of the Cloud Design Box trainers, on the call. We've got Lloyd, one of our consultants, and Darren, our operations manager. So hello, everyone.
Hi, Tony.
Hi, Tony.
Hi, Tony.
So breakout rooms are something new that have come within Microsoft Teams meetings for online lessons. So a teacher can now divide up their class team into individual smaller groups. They do have the ability within the breakout room as the setup, so they can actually set the group sizes. So from anywhere from just a couple of students to half the class can actually go into a breakout room. So there's actually no limit on that. Teachers can also name the breakout rooms as the students come in there, and they can also decide which students go into which breakout room. So, which is quite good. So they've got a random setting in there, so they can let Microsoft decide that, or the teacher can actually place students themselves into each individual breakout room, so they can actually put the strengths and the weaknesses of each child or each student into a room to also actually sort of enhance that that particular group, if you like.
Is it easy, Keith, to move the students around? Let's say that Microsoft shuffles them into the right places, but then you discover you've got two students that really don't get on well together, and you need to move them into different rooms. Is that an easy thing to do?
I found that you have to close the room and bring the students out, and to reshuffle them yourself. It depends as a teacher. I personally would I'd set the rooms up myself. And I would then also place the students into those rooms. But then again, if you've got a group of 20 plus students, that could take a couple of minutes to actually sort out.
Do you have to do that for each? So you've got a lesson and you've scheduled that, you've got a meeting, and then you create breakout rooms. Do you have to do that just in time, like literally you start the lesson and then you have to put people in breakout rooms, or can you do it before the lesson starts?
I've had no experience of that as such. The only way I've actually found out that you can actually generate the room prior to the students coming to it is to actually open the meeting.
Okay.
So you start the meeting, generate the rooms, and then close the meeting before everybody comes to it. One of the beauties of it is if it's a reoccurring lesson, I've found that the breakout rooms actually stay. So once they've been created, they will stay continuously from one lesson to the next.
So if you've made a recurrent lesson in Teams, you've set up a team meeting and you tick the box and you said, this is every Tuesday, 10 o'clock, the rooms stay.
Rooms will stay. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. When you close the meeting, the students are actually removed from the rooms and they go back to the kind of the main area, if you like, ready for allocation. So then when you restart your lesson, all you need to do is just reallocate the students, which is good.
Yeah, that's not too bad, because I was thinking there's a lot of work every time you start a lesson. You've got to do the shuffle and then keep those two separated. But if you can set the rooms up so all the kids are in the right place, and then when you come back in, next Tuesday morning, it's all still there. You can just carry on. That's not bad at all.
Yeah, you just got to reallocate the kids on the next lesson. But also the beauty is that from one lesson to the next, you can actually mix the kids up. So then you're putting different strengths and weaknesses across the classroom into different groups. So then you can come up with a more rounded set of results, if you like.
And I guess most subjects, you've got maybe 2 lessons a week anyway. It might be like Tuesday 10 a.m. and Thursday 2 o'clock. And I guess you could have both of those scheduled as recurrent meetings.
Absolutely.
So Tuesdays and Thursdays, and then each of those can have its own set of breakout rooms where the mix is a bit different.
Yeah, for sure.
Darren, what sort of groups would you typically use in a class? Would you just send people off into pairs, in which case you might have to create like 15 breakout rooms, or would you tend to work in bigger groups, or is this just going to depend on the teacher and how they teach?
It depends what you're doing. I mean, there's two. If you think about classroom layout, how you lay your tables out. You've got your traditional forward facing where everybody listens to the teacher. And it's all forward facing, and in there you might maybe have some group work, because that teacher would say, well, just turn to the person next to you, and that's your partnership, that's your pair. But if you're in a modern languages classroom, for example, you're probably going to have it split into different tables with, 4 or 5 kids in each table. You might even name them, red group, yellow group, red group. If it's an English class, you might have, Shelley, Byron, as your class, as your groups. And for me, I think there's 2 reasons you might move somebody into a breakout room as a group like that. One is that you want them to work with each other collaboratively. So you want those 4 or 5 students in that group to be, working on the whiteboard together, brainstorming, coming up with ideas. You might be doing some kind of jigsaw activity where, each of the groups go off and they each look at a different aspect of something. And then after 10 or 15 minutes, they all come back and they all do a bit of a show and tell to the whole class. So that's the collaborative model. But the other model might be you send those kids off into those areas just so that they're working on a little table, but they might still be doing independent work. The students might be sitting there getting on with their assignments, doing some reading, painting, sculpting, colouring in, collaging, whatever it is they're doing, but they just happen to have some other kids next to them for company. So it's not just for collaboration.
In the virtual world, it's quite lonely if you're working from home, when normally you'd be sat on a table next to somebody, having a chat to them while you did your work, in maybe some lessons. And I guess that's something that you're missing out from, that they could use these breakout rooms for.
Yeah, it's a different way of using it for, social purposes. And I think the main thing for me for breakout rooms is, if you've got 30 kids in a class and 1 teacher, participating in that meeting is quite stressful. And we've got a handful of people here, and it's not too stressful because I know you all, and I don't have to watch too many. I'm not looking for visual cues too much. I can see Keith smiling and Tony smiling. But if you've got 30 other people, if you're a student and you're watching 29 other people and a teacher, the mental stress on you is quite a lot socially, because you're having to look for all these cues. Are people listening? What's he doing? He's picking his nose. Oh, that's a nice background. You've got all those things going on. Whereas if you just take it into a smaller space, from a social perspective and psychologically, it's less challenging. It uses up less brain power doing all that social stuff. It's more comfortable. And if you think about a classroom, look at a primary classroom. How are they laid out? It's red group, yellow group, blue group, rather than every student seeing every other student.
Absolutely. I think from a creative perspective, I think smaller groups are far more productive and far more creative. Yeah. So yeah, definitely, a good thing.
And what sort of time length would you expect the sort of groups to be used for?
I think quite short.
Yeah.
I think come in, start your meeting, say hello, make sure everybody's okay. Maybe, depending on what subject you've got, hand over a bit of new learning. This is how you do rounding up in maths, or here's something I need to tell you about the fall of the Weimar Republic. Just hand that stuff over, and then fairly quickly send the kids off into their breakout rooms. And depending what that activity is, you might stay longer or come back quicker. So if it's a brainstorming activity on a whiteboard, as part of a jigsaw session, you want to keep that quite short.
Yes.
Because otherwise, the kids will finish early and you'll have off-task behavior. So you want to inject a bit of pace by saying, right, you've got 5 minutes to talk about this, then I'll bring you back.
Yeah.
Whereas if it's individual and kids are getting on with individual work, you kind of meat and potatoes work, but they just happen to be sat next to each other, let that go a bit longer, 20, 25 minutes maybe.
Yeah. The teacher can send announcements into the breakout rooms. It comes in via the chat, so a teacher can actually manage the time and give a warning of a student. You say you've got 5 minutes left, a couple of minutes left, whatever, and that actually is then distributed from the teacher, and that actually goes into the students' chat area, so they can have an idea how much time they've actually got left to work on a piece. Yeah.
And just sort of building on that, Keith, how does the teacher sort of keep track of who's got where in the breakout rooms? Can go in and visit them and see how they're getting on, or is it the case that the teacher's just waiting for them to come back into the sort of the main meeting?
No, the teacher can actually come into the breakout room, and they actually appear unannounced, which is really quite good. So not that like the element of surprise, but it also kind of conveys, but it also conveys to the students the fact that yes, the teacher can actually turn up at any time. So any kind of off-topic sort of behaviour hopefully can be sort of managed, kind of psychologically, if you like. But yeah, so the teacher can come in and out the room quite easily. Yeah.
I'm guessing that's what they'll do in real life, wouldn't they?
That's right. That's right. The way I see it, these breakout rooms, the live meetings and the breakout rooms, they are analogous to normal good classroom practice. So if you're a good teacher and you've got good classroom management, so that you're injecting pace, you're making sure all the students are on task, then you're doing these things anyway. You're saying to the students, right, this is the activity you need to do. You've got 5 minutes to do it, 10 minutes, 10 minutes to do the activity. And it's like the Captain Kirk Scotty thing, right? Captain Kirk says, I need this done in 5 minutes. And Scotty, the engineer, says, no, it's going to take 10 because he's doubled it. And you do the same. You say to the kids, I need you to get this done in kind of 5 minutes or so. And then actually, really, after 5 minutes, you might say, right, another 2 minutes. And the kids never add it up, right? But just so you're always kind of warming them up to the idea they're going to be coming back. So they need to crack on and get the work done that's been set ready for when they come back to the main classroom.
Can you still record in these breakout rooms then? Could if a teacher, if they was dropping into some rooms as was mentioning, could they drop into a room and then maybe start recording? And then maybe go into another room and record that as well, so they can still monitor what's going on if they need to, without actually being in that room.
Checking up on it afterwards. Sort of
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, they can. I found that the students themselves can't start the recording once they go into the room. The teacher has to go into that room, then start the recording. But when the teacher actually leaves that room recording continues on, if you like. Until that meeting is either they go in and close the recording, switch it off, or they actually close the room and bring the students back to the main meeting area. Also, the teacher can start a recording in the main meeting area prior to the breakout room starting. So any preamble or any learning points could be recorded. If the teacher leaves the main area and goes into the breakout room without switching that first recording off, the screen just goes dark and the recording actually doesn't stop. So it does actually need to wait for the teacher to come back and then physically turn that recording off. So yeah, so you can actually be recording everywhere all at once, so to speak.
That's good, because otherwise the risk might be that you'd forget. I move into the breakout room and it stops the recording. I come back. So basically, if you start a recording, it keeps going until you, as the teacher, stop it.
Yes.
It'd be quite nice. Sorry, I was just going to say, it'd be quite nice if there was a button in the main area to record all the meeting rooms as well, wouldn't it? Rather than having to go into each individual one.
Yeah, I could see that potentially coming. Also, around meetings and when meetings are generated, obviously, you have your lobby functionality, which I'll talk about again shortly. But when you start the meeting up and you set all the students' microphones to mute and turn off the fact that the students can't be presenters, when they actually are moved from the main meeting area into the breakout rooms, those restrictions are actually lifted and removed. So the students then can unmute the microphones, they can all become presenters. But when they actually return back to the main meeting, those restrictions are reapplied, which I thought was really quite good.
That makes sense, actually, because obviously in a main meeting with 30 kids and one teacher, you can't have everybody with their mic on because there's lots of background noise. But by the time you've shrunk it down to 5 or 4 or 3 people in a breakout, actually it's quite natural to have those microphones on, because you can just go, what's the answer to question 6? I just can't do it. And you just talk naturally without having to kind of switch yourself back on. But the students can still, they can choose to turn their microphone off and on, and their camera.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, some students don't wish to share their, if you kind of what's going on in the background behind their camera. So yeah, they can still turn the camera off. They still have the background where they can grey out areas and do what they need. Also, what I've found is that if a student chooses to leave the breakout room early and wants to go back to the main meeting, they're actually re-entered into the lobby area. So the teacher then has to admit them back into the main meeting.
Oh, they go all the way out.
Yes.
And back in.
So if for example, if a teacher was out of the main meeting area, had gone into a breakout room to see what was going on there, a student from another breakout room can't go back to the main area. They're put on hold, and then when the teacher comes back into the main meeting, they're then signaled, it's flashed up a message that there's someone waiting in the lobby, and then the student is admitted then back into the main meeting out of there.
So it's actually better than real life then. So if a teacher goes out to check on another group, the other students can't come back into the classroom and start messing around until the teacher's back in there.
Yeah.
They're queuing up outside in silence.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that's when I've tested the system. That's what I've found. Yeah, which I thought was quite neat, really. Yeah.
A lot of this is better than real life. Better than real life because in real life, when you send kids out, send a group of kids and you put them out in the corridor outside your classroom to do a breakout activity, or you send them down to the hall or down to the library. You don't really know what they're doing, what they're saying to each other, Whereas with this, you can spawn every breakout room and start the recording. And you can, you'd have to go in retrospectively and see what was said. But if anything happens, if there's any whisper of somebody being a bit upset, and you see somebody out in the corridor crying, you think, what's happening? And then it's just hearsay, isn't it, between a couple of kids? But here you can actually go back, watch the video, and go, well, it's because you were rude.
Yeah,
you should say sorry, and we'll move on.
I think that's kind of one of the concerns that I have seen from teachers, is that they're concerned around safeguarding within breakout rooms. But I must admit, the more I've looked at it and the more I think about it, and I've discussed with yourself and Lloyd, I think that it is an immensely safe area, and I think that, like I say, it's highly monitored, or it can be highly monitored by the teachers. And I think it is a genuinely safe place for students to do work in. Yeah, for sure.
Lloyd and Keith, what are sort of the things that the sort of the questions people ask about safeguarding? What sort of concerns do they normally have?
I think it's a lot of online bullying. I think what they are concerned about is that students getting together and obviously saying things to each other within the breakout room. So
it's been able to monitor what's going on as well. I think the fact that you can record in the meetings is a big one, and the fact that even just in a normal Teams meeting, teachers said that they have to record everything that's going on in just a live Teams meeting. So talking about the breakout rooms where you could have multiple meetings going on within the class, where there wouldn't be a teacher present, the fact that you can actually just record that without a teacher being in the meeting is beneficial, and it does help the safeguarding as well.
So that's I guess a nice workaround, but again, I guess sort of comparing it to real life, you wouldn't be able to stop those things happening in real life if they were said, but at least in this environment, it still might happen. You can't stop it, can you? But I guess it's recorded.
And
I guess you need good communication as well, don't you? So you need really clear policies to the students to set expectations for behaviour in these spaces, just like you do in a real classroom. And the parents need to know as well, because of course at home, it may be that the parents are more involved. They need to keep an eye on their kids as well. So everybody needs to know what the expectations are.
Yes, and also if you've got any classroom support workers as well, when you are initially setting up your meeting in the actual breakout rooms, you can then place those support workers into the into the breakout room. And also those support workers will stay there until you close the room, and then everybody moves together from one place, from the breakout room back to the main meeting and back into a breakout room if you're doing a lesson that way. So yeah, so everyone's all sort of together, if you like. So which I think is quite good.
Lloyd, after these recordings have happened in the breakout rooms, whereabouts do they get stored? Can other people see breakout room activity that they were not in?
They won't be able to see that now. It's only the members of that actual room. So when you used to create a breakout room, that would then go into your meeting chat area. So whatever you call that room, it'll be listed under that name within your chats. And that'll be the same for the student as well, so they can access and still look back at maybe any of the conversations they had within there. But yeah, none of the students would be able to access any of the breakout rooms that they was not assigned to.
Right, that's interesting. Yeah. I wasn't sure if it would go into SharePoint in sort of the same folder as the other recordings, or if they're security trims. So I'll have a look at that.
So assuming you've done that thing, because videos used to go into stream, didn't they? And that's changed now, but you can set a policy, get your IT folks to set a policy that makes sure that all those videos now go into the team instead. And that's I guess that's a sensible thing for every school to do. I can't see any reason not to make that change early, because then you've got clarity about where the videos are going. If it's a main meeting, it's going to go into the team, and if it's a breakout room, it'll be in that chat for the meeting. And that to me, that's crystal clear.
So do the breakout recordings go into the OneDrive instead of the SharePoint site?
So they'll still go to the OneDrive. I think when we was in the meeting chat, you could use the link to then go to the main video, which was in the OneDrive. But I remember when we looked at the teacher's view, if they was to go to their chat area on the left-hand side, they could see a list of all of the breakout rooms with the names, and there'd be links to that video if that was stored in OneDrive. If they've got that update, that's come.
Yeah. So it's in the OneDrive, but I mean, teachers probably won't go there necessarily. They'll go to the meeting chat for that meeting, because there's a nice big button for it. But if they really wanted to get behind it and find that file so that they could maybe share that out with parents or something, they could find it in their OneDrive, and that's where it would be.
Teacher ends the lesson prior to the breakout rooms closing. So if you actually to end the lesson while the breakout rooms are all still in progress, everyone just gets thrown out of the whole meeting, if you like. That whole thing's finished. The breakout rooms are emptied. The students are all then taken
right.
out
so
of
if they
the meeting.
To end the lesson, even if some people are still in the breakout room, they could just end the meeting.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
So I guess this is a bit like some of the behavioural issues as well. Is Darren, how do you keep students on task if they're in those breakout rooms and they might be messing around, or they might not be? They might have went away and left their computer running. How do you make sure that they're on task when they're in those separate breakout rooms?
Well, I think it's all about planning, just like any good lesson. If you plan the lesson well, you set the pace so it's appropriate, and you set expectations, then that just carries over. So I guess in terms of breakout rooms, I'd have some rules of thumb that I'd probably follow as a teacher. Just like it's very similar to what I do in the classroom. So, keep the breakout periods relatively short. Don't just send them off and then have a cup of tea. After just a couple of minutes, bring them back. As a teacher, if you move through the groups regularly so that the students know that you are going to be turning up, and especially right at the start of the lesson, make sure that very quickly you cycle through. It's equivalent to walking around the classroom and walking around the backs of all the tables, or walking up and down the rows, because it literally switches the kids on. It makes them think, I better do some work, Sir's watching. And planning is the other big thing. Plan who's going to be in these breakout rooms. If you've got kids that work really well together, put them together. If you've got kids that don't, try and keep them separated. And we talked about mixing it up as well, Keith, a bit. Sometimes the dynamic's really useful to have, one person that's particularly strong at a certain topic, and have them working with somebody that maybe struggles a bit more in that topic. and then you get peer support between the two of them. But that's not a breakout thing. That's just good classroom management.
No, they can bring each other along a bit. So just talking about like schools' internet policy, obviously with breakout rooms, that does bring a different layer and level onto meetings. Would you consider that a school may need to have a look at the policies, maybe around, I don't know, safeguarding or their online policies? Is there any rewrites, do you think, that you could envisage that as a teacher, maybe?
I mean, I think the safeguarding policies and the I guess the user policies that students sign when they join the school and how they'll behave, how they use that software, this really should be added to that if they don't already have some etiquette in place already, because it's another way they can communicate. They could do this just by using the chat feature if that's enabled for them. They could write in a Word document and share it. You know, they can still do this even without breakout rooms. So I think, you know, a lot of schools will already have that in their policy. Right. It's just making people aware of that, and the teachers obviously making people aware of that as well.
Yeah, it's business as usual in terms of school rules and good behaviour. I suppose the only thing that might change is maybe some of the sanctions. So you might say, for example, in a real classroom, you know, you've been a bit silly. You know, you don't get to work in a group for a while. You have to come sit at the front with me. And I guess you could do that. You could, you know, if there's a student you particularly need to keep an eye on, or a couple of students, you could keep them in the main room with you. And say, right,
put them in a breakout room by themselves.
I was going to say that sounded too harsh.
Got sin bin.
Yeah.
Well, seriously, one of the things you could do is, rather than kind of saying, "Oh, you've blown it now, you're out of this break," you could just go in and you could say, "You've been a bit silly. So what I'm going to do, you take them out. You have a word with them in the main room where it's just you and that student. You explain what they've done wrong, why they need to get better, and then you put them back." Or you could use a breakout room. You know, if you're doing a whole class activity and you haven't actually set up breakout rooms specifically, but you've got one student that's being a bit silly that day, they've had too much sugar on that one occasion, they're basically a good kid but too much sugar today, you can just pull them into that breakout room for a little moment and just have a quiet word, recenter them, and then bring them back into the main area as well, especially if you've got TAs in the classroom as well to help you.
I guess one difference with people working at home is they might get distracted from other devices and other apps, that if a student gets kicked out or they're messing about, they might contact them on WhatsApp, on Facebook, on Snapchat, whatever it is, outside of this environment. And I'm guessing that, you know, there's nothing you can really do about that. Whereas if you're in the classroom, you could obviously take the phones off them or stop them using phones in school.
It's about minimizing disruption. So if you have one student that's been a bit silly today, you kind of have to take them out of that situation so they're not disrupting their breakout groups or the whole class. And if they're on WhatsApp for 5 minutes, what you then do, of course, is you have a word with the parents, or you go through your internal procedures. You know, it might go to their form tutor, and then perhaps the form tutor has a word with the head of year, and the head of year will call the parents, whatever your process is in the school. But that can still happen. I think what's really important for kids to know is you've still got their mum's phone number.
Yes. I suppose then that takes us almost full circle back to the point where we say is keep the breakout room sessions relatively short, and obviously keep as a teacher, keep visiting the rooms on a regular basis to monitor progress. So yeah. I think that's kind of the crux of it.
When you talk about the breakout room, so if you was actually to set one up, does the student have to click into that room? Is there a link that, you know, appears, or does it just happen automatically? So the student will be taken straight into a breakout room.
Yeah. What's the experience like for students? Yeah. Is it more complicated?
So obviously, no, the teacher will generate the room, will then allocate the students, and all there is a button to press is start the room. The student then gets a 10-second countdown to actually announce that they're going to be moved. And then literally the call sets them so that they go on hold, and then they reappear into the breakout room. And almost it's the same thing happens in reverse. So when it comes to the end of the breakout room session, the teacher will then just click the close the room button. There's an announcement comes on at the top of the screen for the students and saying they've got 10 seconds. and then after 10 seconds, the room is closed, and then the students are then automatically moved over. And it literally is just a flicker of the screen, and they come back into the main meeting area.